The small blind. The small blind sits directly to the left of the button and is forced to post a partial bet before the hand even begins. Despite this forced investment, the small blind is actually considered a weak position because the player will be out of position for the rest of the hand against everyone except the big blind. This means that even though chips are already in the pot, players must resist the temptation to defend too liberally, as poor post-flop positioning often outweighs the discount on the price to play. Strong players treat the small blind with caution, only continuing with hands that can comfortably handle being out of position. The big blind. The big blind is the last player to act before the flop and is required to post a full forced bet to start the action. Because of this initial investment, the big blind often gets a discounted or even free opportunity to see a flop, making it one of the more flexible defending positions at the table. However, like the small blind, the big blind remains out of position for the rest of the hand once the flop arrives, which limits how aggressively a player can continue without a strong holding. Understanding when to defend the big blind and when to fold despite the discount is a skill that separates strong players from the rest. The under the gun. Under the gun, often shortened to UTG, refers to the player seated immediately to the left of the big blind, making them the first person to act before the flop. This is widely considered the toughest seat at the table because the player must make a decision with no information about how anyone else intends to play their hand. As a result, players in this position are expected to play a much tighter range of hands, generally only entering pots with strong holdings such as high pocket pairs or premium Broadway cards. Acting too loosely from under the gun is one of the fastest ways to bleed chips, since every player left to act tricks still has a chance to wake up with a monster hand. The UTG+1. UTG+1 is the seat directly to the left of under the gun and only exists at fuller tables. While this position has the benefit of one fewer player to worry about compared to UTG, it still sits deep in early position, meaning the same tight premium-focused approach applies. Players here are still acting with very little information, so the range of hands worth playing remains narrow. This seat is one of the first to disappear at shorter tables, since 6-max games typically start the action much closer to the button. The UTG+2. UTG+2 follows directly after UTG+1 and represents the final seat still considered early position at a full table. Players here can loosen their range slightly compared to the two seats before them, but the difference is marginal. This is still a seat where caution outweighs aggression, since 5 or more players remain to act behind them. Like UTG+1, this position only appears at 9 or 10-handed tables and is absent from shorter formats. The low jack. The low jack sits between UTG+2 and the hijack and marks the beginning of what's considered middle position. This is where players start to feel comfortable opening a wider range of hands, since the number of players left to act has dropped noticeably. The low jack is named for being 2 seats before the cutoff, mirroring the hijack's position 1 seat closer. While still not a premium seat, skilled players begin applying more pressure from here than anywhere earlier at the table. And if you're finding this breakdown useful, go ahead and hit subscribe because the most powerful seats at the table are still coming up. The hijack. The hijack is the seat directly to the right of the cutoff and is where players begin gaining serious positional power. While not as strong as the cutoff or button, the hijack allows players to open more hands than early or middle position because fewer players are left to act. Strong players often use the hijack to apply pressure before the late position players get a chance to control the hand. The cutoff. The cutoff is the seat directly to the right of the button and is widely regarded as one of the most profitable positions at the table. Players in the cutoff benefit from having only 1 or 2 players left to act before the action reaches the button, giving them significantly more control over the hand. This position allows for a much wider opening range, including suited hands, smaller pairs, and connectors that would be far too risky in earlier positions. Skilled players often look to attack weaker players in the blinds from the cutoff, using positional pressure to win pots without needing to show down a strong hand. The button. The button is the single most powerful position in poker, as the player here acts last on every betting round after the flop. Before the flop, the blinds act near the end of the order, but once the flop is dealt, the action flips entirely. The blinds are now forced to act first, while the button gets to act last for the rest of the hand. This positional advantage allows button players to see how everyone else reacts before making a decision, giving them maximum information with minimum risk. Because of this, the button can profitably open with an extremely wide range of hands, often raising far more frequently than any other seat at the table. Many of poker's most aggressive and successful strategies are built entirely around exploiting the power of the button. making it the seat every player fights to reach. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. But there are 3 important fixes before finalizing. 1. Small blind line is still incorrect. The player will be out of position for the rest of the hand against everyone except the big blind. The small blind is actually out of position against the big blind too after the flop. Use this instead. Despite this forced investment, the small blind is actually considered a weak position, because the player will usually be out of position for the rest of the hand, even against the big blind in blind versus blind pots. 2. Big blind line needs slight correction. You wrote, the big blind is the last player to act before the flop. This is mostly true in the initial pre-flop order. But cleaner wording is, the big blind is one of the last players to act before the flop and closes the action if no one raises. That sounds more technically correct. 3. Cutoff line is still wrong. You wrote having only 1 or 2 players left to act before the action reaches the button. From the cutoff, 3 players are still behind. The button, small blind, and big blind. Use this instead. Players in the cutoff benefit from having only the button and the 2 blinds left to act, giving them significantly more control than earlier positions.